The golden light of dusk spilled across the dry, cracked earth of a northern European village in the 1890s. A creaking ox cart rumbled past a huddle of thatched huts, stirring a haze of dust that hung heavy in the air. Ira walked barefoot alongside the road, her steps slow and uncertain. She clutched a worn satchel in one hand and held tightly to two small children with the other. Nimra, 6 years old, and little Rayan, barely 3. Her sari was frayed at the edges, her face weathered and hollow. There was a haunting stillness in her eyes, as though they had forgotten what it meant to hope. She had once been radiant, cherished, protected, full of laughter. Ira had been the daughter of a proud family, known for their rigid traditions and iron pride. But she had broken the mold. She had fallen in love with Raza, a man her family deemed beneath her, and for that, they cast her out. Love had been her rebellion. Love had been her freedom, and then it became her ruin. In the warm glow of a simpler time, Ira had stood in a modest clay-walled home, heavy with pregnancy and light with joy. The scent of lentils and spices floated through the air as she served dinner to Raza, her husband. He had rough hands from long hours of work, but his touch was always gentle with her. He had kissed her forehead that evening, a quiet gesture of love in a world that asked for too much and gave too little. Their home was humble, but in it there was peace. But peace, she would come to learn, was fleeting. It crumbled the way dust slipped between fingers, quietly, without warning. Fate had circled overhead for some time, unseen like a vulture in a clouded sky. Rain poured as Ira stood in the graveyard, soaked and shivering. Her fingers dug into her children's shoulders as they stared at the fresh mound of earth. Raza's name was etched into stone, cold and unyielding. Behind her, whispers and scorn followed her like a second shadow. His family watched from a distance, offering no comfort. Their eyes held no sorrow, only disdain. Later that day, grief turned to violence. Within the confines of Raza's family home, everything unraveled. Screams pierced the walls, a suitcase thudded against the floor. Ira was dragged by the arm, her children clinging to her skirts. Raza's mother, sharp-eyed and cruel, threw words like stones. "You were nothing before him. You're less than nothing now. They took everything. The house. What little money Raza had managed to save. Even her dignity was stripped away. She was cast out like rot from the fruit of their name. Mourning had no place for a woman like her, not in their world. Days blurred into each other. Ira wandered the market lanes, with her children, settling into the same dusty corner each day beneath a ragged shade cloth. Her sari was torn, dirt clinging to the hems. Rayan often dozed in her lap while Nimra picked at the crumbs of discarded flatbread. The sun scorched mercilessly above. Passers-by averted their eyes. She wasn't a person anymore. Just a reminder of what misfortune looked like when it wore the face of a once beautiful woman. Hunger became familiar. Desperation, a constant companion. Her children cried less now. Their stomachs had learned the rhythm of emptiness, and then one day someone stopped. He stood at a distance at first, loading grain onto an ox cart. A tall, broad-shouldered man with wind-bitten skin and quiet eyes the color of turned earth. His clothes were rough-spun, his presence unassuming. But something in the way he looked at her was different. Not pity, not disgust, just human. He walked over slowly, wordless at first. The heavy silence of the market shifted as he knelt beside Nimra and extended a worn metal flask. Drink, little one, he said softly. Era moved instinctively, pulling her daughter closer. Her body went rigid with fear. Strangers meant risk. Strangers meant danger. I don't want anything, he said quickly, his voice gentle. Just, no one should be this alone. His name was Zoran. She didn't know it then, but this moment, the kindness of a stranger in the middle of a sunburnt day, would change everything. The dust around her still clung, but in that moment, beneath the market's haze, something bloomed. Quiet, unexpected, and perhaps the beginning of something new. The ox cart rattled across a sea of mist-covered fields as dawn crept slowly across the horizon. The wheels groaned under the weight, wood grumbling against stone and earth. Zoran walked silently beside the cart, his boots damp with dew, his step steady and unhurried. In the back of the cart, wrapped in scratchy wool blankets that smelled faintly of hay and smoke, Era held her children close. Nimra leaned against her side, half asleep, while Rayon's head rested in her lap. They bounced gently with the movement of the cart, lulled by the rhythm and silence. Zoran didn't ask where she came from. He hadn't pried the day he offered them water, nor the evening he returned and quietly said, "Come." And now, as the cart moved steadily through the early fog, there were no questions, no explanations, just a hush that felt more like peace than distance. When they reached the farmhouse, it was near nightfall. A small wooden structure sat at the edge of a field, nestled against a line of crooked trees. The paint had long faded, and the shutters hung a little uneven, but it stood firm, sturdy, like the man who led them there. Inside, warmth greeted them, not from the fire but from the simplicity. A low table, 2 cots, stacks of firewood, a worn rug beneath their feet. Zoran ladled steaming lentils into tin bowls and placed them in front of the children. They ate without hesitation, devouring every bite. Era sat still at first, watching them. Relief loosened the tightness in her chest, but shame lingered behind her ribs. She felt as if she were stealing something: safety, kindness, a place to belong. "You can stay," Zoran said simply, not looking at her. "Help with the harvest. I don't expect anything more." Era nodded, blinking away tears before they could spill. Her throat ached with unspoken gratitude. She had no words that could carry the weight of what she felt. The days that followed were hard, but in their hardship, there was rhythm. Era learned to milk goats, her hands clumsy at first, but steadier each day. Nimra knelt in the dirt beside Zoran as he showed her how to tuck seeds into furrows. "Be gentle," he told her, "but not too gentle. Seeds need to know the earth wants them." Rayon, tiny and full of laughter, rode high on Zoran's shoulders. As they walked the edge of the field, his hands grasping tufts of Zoran's hair like reins. Era wasn't new to labor, but this land demanded more. It cracked the skin, tested the back, and spared no one from its demands. Still, in the ache of her muscles and the sting of early blisters, she found something unexpected: renewal. The pain didn't just take, it gave purpose, quiet pride. She went to sleep each night not empty but full. Then came the storm. It rolled in without warning, clouds tearing across the sky like wild beasts. Thunder cracked so loud the walls trembled. Rain lashed the fields, in horizontal sheets. The roof of the shed buckled under the weight of water. Ira ran into the tempest without hesitation, shielding the rows of new seedlings with sacks and tarps. She slipped and fell once, hands scraping against wet soil. From the corner of her eye, she saw Zoran, arms full of rope, trying to tie down a flailing door. "Inside!" he shouted over the howl of the wind. But she didn't listen. She ran toward him instead. Together, soaked and shaking, they pulled the door shut, the final snap of the latch echoing like a heartbeat against the storm's rage. Later, when the worst had passed, they sat near the fire, drenched and exhausted. Water still dripped from their hair and clothes. Zoran rose quietly and fetched a thick blanket, draping it over her shoulders with a gentleness that caught her off guard. "You're stronger than you think," he said. She met his gaze. Her voice came low, nearly a whisper. "I wasn't always," he held her eyes for a moment, his face unreadable, then said simply, "No one is, not at first." That night, Era did something she hadn't done in years. After the children fell asleep, curled safely beneath quilts, she pulled a stub of charcoal and a torn scrap of cloth from her satchel, and she wrote. Just a few lines, nothing fancy. Her hand trembled, but the words came. She kept writing night after night, sometimes poetry, sometimes memories. Once, a dream. Zoran never said anything, but once or twice she saw him watching from the doorway, quiet as a shadow. The peace, however, was not without its edges. One morning, they found a deer carcass near the edge of the field. Its throat had been torn open, ribs gnawed bare. "Wolves," Zoran said grimly, crouching to inspect the tracks. He stood, eyes scanning the woods. "They'll be back." He retrieved an old rifle from a cabinet and began stacking firewood higher around the perimeter of the farmhouse. Era kept the children, close after dark. She heard sounds in the night, snapping twigs, low growls that made her skin crawl. One night the sound came too near. A snarl, a flash of movement beyond the window. Zoran fired into the dark. The gunshot cracked the silence. Rayan screamed. Nimra clung to her. Era held them tight, heart pounding, not just from fear of wolves, but from the deeper, more dangerous fear swelling inside her. She was beginning to feel safe again. She was beginning to trust, and trust for her was no longer a gentle thing. It was terrifying. A week later, a man from a neighboring village came to trade. Mukhtar, rough around the edges with a hawk's nose and eyes that missed nothing. He stepped onto the porch, cast one long look at Ira as she worked in the garden, and smirked. "A widow? With children? Bold of you, Zoran," he said, his tone mocking. Zoran, stacking hay nearby, straightened slowly. "Careful what you say," he replied, voice low and sharp. Era heard them from the window. She froze. Her hands trembled, but she didn't flinch. Not this time. Her face hardened, and she turned back to her work. Not everyone welcomed new blooms in old soil. Some people only saw weeds where beauty dared to grow. But the earth did not care. It received whatever was planted. And deep beneath its surface, something had already taken root. The sun dipped low behind the hills, casting the village in amber light as lanterns began to flicker awake. Their glow bobbed gently on strings strung across huts and trees, swaying with the soft wind. Drums echoed in the distance, playful and wild as laughter rang out and spice-laden smoke curled from open fires. It was the annual harvest festival, a rare night when toil gave way to joy. Zoran stood beside the cart, brushing dirt from his shirt. "Come," he said quietly. Era stood in the doorway of the farmhouse, a simple red shawl draped over her shoulders. She hesitated. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the doorframe. But when Nimra tugged at her hand with bright eyes and Rayan squealed in delight at the music, she nodded. Together they walked into the village. Some heads turned, some eyes narrowed. Whispers chased her steps like shadows. Is that her? Zoran brought her? She's the widow. From across the ridge, isn't she? But not all stares were sharp. A few women smiled gently. An old man tipped his turban. A child handed Nimra a sweet ball of jaggery and giggled when she bit into it too fast. Era stood back as the children ran off to play. Zoran disappeared briefly, pulled into a wrestling ring marked by stones and laughter. She watched from the edge, her lips parting in a smile as he grappled with a man twice his size and sent him tumbling into the dirt. The crowd roared. Someone handed Era a cup of sweet lassie. She laughed, genuinely, carelessly, for the first time in years, but joy never lingers too long unchallenged. From the other side of the festival, 3 men approached. Lean, sharp-faced, their strides laced with cruelty. Raza's cousins. There you are, one of them sneered. Thought you could disappear? Era's hand instinctively reached for her children. Her voice, though low, was steady. This is not your concern. You left with what was ours, said the second, his lip curling. His blood, his name, his coin. I left with nothing but my children and my grief, Era replied. The third stepped forward, chest puffed. You owe us. Then Zoran was there, stepping between them like a wall. She owes you nothing, he said. The air tightened. Lanterns swung. The drumming faltered. A small crowd began to form, murmuring. A fist came first, swift and mean, aimed at Zoran's jaw. He staggered, then answered with his own. Dirt kicked up as men fell. The cousins fought like jackals, wild and snarling. Zoran met them like a storm, grounded and furious. Era pulled the children back, shielding them with her body as dust. Rose and fists flew. Blood splattered across a hanging garland. One of the cousins hit the ground with a groan. Another lunged at Zoran with a broken bottle. Zoran turned, caught his wrist, and slammed him down. The third fled. Breathing hard, blood dripping from a gash on his brow, Zoran stood as the crowd broke into startled claps and shocked gasps. Some whispered his name with newfound respect. Era ran to him, hands trembling. She touched his face, checked the wound. You stubborn, reckless man. Zoran winced but smirked. Still think I shouldn't have brought you here? Her gaze held his. I think I was meant to find you. The days that followed blurred, in slow rhythms. Zoran lay on the cot, groaning as Era dabbed a cloth across his bruised skin. She ground herbs for poultices, stirred lentil broth with one hand, while comforting Rayan with the other. Nimra helped too, folding cloth and humming lullabies. Each evening she found herself reading old journal entries aloud, her voice barely above a whisper but steady. Zoran listened, his eyes closed, not speaking, just there. One morning, Era discovered a new drawing tucked under her pillow. It was childish in Nimra's hand. 4 figures, stick-limbed and smiling, standing beneath a large tree. The sun beamed above them and little hearts floated near their heads. Era stared at it for a long time. The storm wasn't over. Life was still raw, still laced with hard choices and harder memories. But she had a roof now. Arms that didn't take but held. Soil that didn't spit her out, but opened wide. That evening, she walked out into the field alone. The sky burned, pink and gold as dusk crept in. Era knelt beside a furrow and placed a single rose bush into the ground. Its petals were red, bright as blood, soft as ash. Zoran approached behind her, his steps light. "Roses don't belong here," he said. Era glanced up at him, then back to the roots in her hands. "Neither did I," she murmured. "But I'm still here." He didn't reply. He didn't need to. Their eyes met, not with the heat of new romance, but with something quieter, something deeper. Trust. Earned, not given. Worn like calluses, not offered like flowers. She turned back to the rose, burying its roots gently. And for the first time in a long, long while, she believed it would grow. We don't always bloom in perfect gardens. Sometimes we bloom in the cracks, between storms, among scars. Era's story is not one of fairy tales, but of soil and survival, fists and fire, and finally, peace. Because love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet hand beside yours in the dirt, helping you plant something that wasn't meant to grow, but does anyway.